For 10 episodes we told you the story of the Mughal Empire. The battles, the love stories, the art, the architecture, the poetry, the tragedy. And it was all true. Every word of it. But there is another truth, one that textbooks in India have softened, romanticized, or buried entirely, that deserves to be told with equal honesty. Because a civilization cannot be understood only through its monuments. It must also be understood through what it destroyed, what it erased, what it replaced, what it suppressed. The Mughal Empire built magnificent things. It also demolished magnificent things. It produced extraordinary art, and it banned extraordinary art. It gave India a language, and it made another language feel inferior in its own homeland. The legacy of the Mughals is not simply beautiful. It is complicated. It is contested. It is raw. And in this final episode, we are going to tell you all of it. The bright side and the dark side. Because history without honesty is just mythology. And you deserve better than mythology. Before the Babri Masjid was a mosque, it was a site that Hindus had venerated for centuries as the birthplace of Ram. Before the mosque at Mathura was built, there was a Hindu temple marking the birthplace of Krishna. Before the Gyanvapi Mosque in Varanasi, there was the Kashi Vishwanath temple, one of the holiest sites in Hinduism. These are not myths. These are documented historical facts recorded in Mughal chronicles themselves, written by Mughal historians who were proud of what their emperors had done. Aurangzeb's own court historian documented the demolition of the Kashi Vishwanath temple in detail. The scale of temple demolition under various Mughal emperors, but particularly under Aurangzeb, was staggering. Historian Richard Eaton, no anti-Muslim polemicist but a careful scholar, documented the destruction of at least 80 significant temples under Aurangzeb alone. Each demolished temple was not merely a building. It was a community's sacred memory, its history, its identity, its connection to its ancestors, pulverized and replaced. India is still living with the consequences of these decisions. The wounds have not healed. They have simply been covered. For 2,000 years before the Mughals arrived, Sanskrit was the language of India's greatest literature, philosophy, mathematics, medicine, and science. The Vedas, the Upanishads, the Mahabharata, the Ramayana, Kalidasa's poetry, Aryabhata's mathematics, Karaka's medicine, Sushruta's surgery, the world's first recorded surgical procedures. All of it in Sanskrit. The Mughal court adopted Persian as its official language. Not Sanskrit. Not Hindi. Not any of the languages that the vast majority of India's population actually spoke. Persian. A foreign language imported from Iran, beautiful, sophisticated, and completely inaccessible to the overwhelming majority of India's people. While Persian flourished in Mughal courts, patronized, celebrated, rewarded, Sanskrit scholarship lost its institutional support. The great centers of Sanskrit learning that had once attracted students from across Asia, many of them lost their royal patronage, their endowments, their students. Akbar commissioned translations of Sanskrit texts into Persian, which sounds generous until you realize it also meant that Persian was the language of knowledge and Sanskrit was being archived. There is a difference between translation and preservation. One honors a tradition. The other museums it. Imagine being taxed for the religion you were born into. In your own country. On your own ancestral land. Tax not for what you do, but for what you are. The jizya was a tax levied specifically on non-Muslims, Hindus, Sikhs, Jains, Buddhists, for the right to practice their own faith in a land their families had inhabited for thousands of years. Akbar abolished it, one of his greatest acts. Aurangzeb reimposed it, one of his worst. But even Akbar's abolition was not a recognition that the jizya was fundamentally unjust. It was a pragmatic political calculation that an empire of mostly Hindu subjects could not be efficiently governed while treating those subjects as second-class inhabitants of their own homeland. The message of the jizya, however practically it was applied, was unmistakable. Your religion makes you lesser. Your presence in this land is tolerated, not your right but our generosity. Millions of ordinary Hindus, farmers, weavers, merchants, paid this tax for generations. Not to maintain their privileges. Simply to continue existing as themselves. The psychological cost of that, the daily humiliation of it, is incalculable. Here is something that should disturb you deeply. Ask most educated Indians to name 5 rulers of ancient India, rulers from before the Mughals, and many will struggle. Ask them to name 5 Mughal emperors and most will answer instantly. Babur, Akbar, Jahangir, Shah Jahan, Aurangzeb. But Chandragupta Maurya, who built India's first continental empire in 322 BC. Ashoka the Great, who renounced war after Kalinga and built a civilization of compassion. Samudragupta, the Napoleon of ancient India. Vikramaditya, under whose reign Kalidasa wrote and Aryabhata calculated the circumference of the earth. Harsha of Kanauj, who banned meat and built hospitals across northern India. 200 years of Mughal rule, and the British imperial education system that followed it, systematically centered the Mughal period as the reference point of Indian history. Everything before became ancient and remote. Everything after became colonial struggle. The 1500 years of extraordinary Indian civilization between the Mauryas and the Mughals was compressed into a footnote. India was taught to see its own history through a Mughal lens. That is a form of historical erasure, quiet, thorough, and deeply effective. But here is where honest history demands something difficult from us. It demands that we hold 2 truths simultaneously. The dark side is real. The temple demolitions happened. The jizya was unjust. The Persian cultural dominance marginalized Indian traditions. The violence was real and the wounds are real. And the bright side is also real. Akbar's Din-i-Ilahi, his genuine attempt to build a philosophy of universal spiritual inclusion, was 5 centuries ahead of its time. The Mughal synthesis of Persian, Indian, and Central Asian artistic traditions produced things of beauty that belong to all humanity. The Taj Mahal does not belong to Muslims. It does not belong to Hindus. It does not belong to India or Pakistan. It belongs to everyone who has ever loved someone. The classical music tradition that Tansen represents, the miniature paintings that Jahangir commissioned, the Urdu poetry of Ghalib, these are not foreign impositions on India. They are India. They grew from Indian soil, were nourished by Indian talent, and are claimed with pride by Indians of every faith. The Mughal legacy is not good or evil. It is human. Monstrously, magnificently, irreducibly human. In 2022, the Indian government removed chapters on the Mughal Empire from school textbooks. In 2023, Aurangzeb's name was removed from a major road in Pune, renamed to honor Chhatrapati Sambhaji Maharaj, the son Aurangzeb had executed with particular brutality. Cities across India are being renamed, Allahabad back to Prayagraj, Faizabad back to Ayodhya. Streets and institutions that carried Mughal names are being rechristened. Some see this as justice, the restoration of indigenous identity after centuries of imposed foreign nomenclature. Others see it as dangerous, the erasure of history, however complicated, that produced the India we live in today. Both sides have genuine grievances. Both sides have genuine points. The Mughals did impose. They did erase. They did replace. And then the India they built, however imperfectly, became real. Became home. Became identity for hundreds of millions of people across faiths. You cannot become what history has made you. The question is not whether to keep the Mughal legacy or discard it. The question is how to inherit it honestly, acknowledging both its gifts and its crimes, without either worshipping it or burning it. The Mughal Empire made a choice. It made it twice, and chose differently each time. Akbar looked at India, this impossibly diverse, impossibly complex civilization of 100 languages and 1,000 traditions, and made a choice. He chose inclusion. He chose to build an empire that everyone could belong to. He abolished the jizya. He married Hindu women. He appointed Hindu generals. He sat with Jain monks and Jesuit priests and Sufi mystics and asked them all the same question: what is true? His empire was not perfect. His conquests were bloody. His personal record was not unblemished. But the direction he chose, the direction he pointed the Mughal Empire, was toward synthesis, toward tolerance, toward something that could have been extraordinary. Then Aurangzeb looked at the same India, the same impossible complexity, and made the opposite choice. He chose purity over synthesis. He chose exclusion over inclusion. He spent 50 years trying to make India into something it had never been and could never be, a monolithic Islamic empire where one tradition dominated all others. He failed. And in failing he took the entire Mughal project down with him. The lesson of the Mughals is not complicated. Akbar's way worked. Aurangzeb's way destroyed everything. History already gave us the answer. There is a city in Karnataka called Hampi. It was the capital of the Vijayanagara Empire, the last great Hindu empire of southern India, a city that in the 15th century was one of the largest and most prosperous cities on earth. Larger than Rome. Larger than Paris. A city of extraordinary temples, markets, water systems, and scholarship. In 1565 the Deccan Sultanates, the Muslim kingdoms of the Deccan, defeated the Vijayanagara army at the Battle of Talikota. What followed was one of the most complete acts of urban destruction in Indian history. For 6 months soldiers looted and demolished Hampi systematically. The temples were destroyed. The water systems were broken. The population fled. The city, which had taken 2 centuries to build, was reduced to ruins in half a year. It was never rebuilt. Today Hampi is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, acres of magnificent ruins visited by tourists who look at the broken columns and carved walls and have no idea what was lost. This happened before Aurangzeb. This happened while the Mughals were consolidating power. India did not lose only what the British took. It lost things, irreplaceable things, in the centuries before them too. History's losses are rarely credited to only one account. So what do we do with all of this? What do you do when your history is both magnificent and terrible? When the same empire that built the Taj Mahal demolished thousands of temples? When the language that produced Ghalib's heartbreaking ghazals also marginalized Sanskrit and regional tongues? When the administrative genius of Akbar and the brutal intolerance of Aurangzeb are both part of the same story, the same family, the same legacy? You do what honest people have always done with complicated inheritance. You do not pretend the gifts were not real. You do not pretend the crimes did not happen. You do not choose one truth and bury the other. You hold both. You say, this happened. And this also happened. And both of them made us what we are. India is not Mughal. India is not pre-Mughal. India is the argument between them, still unresolved, still passionate, still alive in every debate about a renamed street or a demolished mosque or a history textbook or a Bollywood film about Akbar and Jodha. That argument, that living, breathing, sometimes violent, sometimes beautiful argument, is India. And it is the most honest legacy the Mughals left behind. 336 years. 14 emperors. One extraordinary, terrible, magnificent story. Babur, a genius of war who gave India a dynasty and died missing Central Asia. Humayun, who lost everything and came back and died on a staircase. Akbar, the greatest of them, illiterate, brilliant, flawed, visionary, who showed what India could be. Jahangir, who loved beauty more than power and gave us paintings that still take your breath away. Shah Jahan, who built the most beautiful building on earth for love and died imprisoned looking at it. Aurangzeb, who was pious and monstrous and destroyed what he was given and knew it at the end. The shadows, the 12 emperors who followed, each one diminished, each one powerless, each one carrying a title that had lost its meaning. Bahadur Shah Zafar, the poet who became a symbol when it was too late to be anything else. This was the Mughal Empire. It was not good. It was not evil. It was a human story of ambition and love and faith and cruelty and beauty and destruction, played out on the largest possible stage. History asks only one thing of us: that we look at it honestly. Have we? This is the last class. And the last class deserves a final lesson. History is not a trophy cabinet. It is not a list of grievances. It is not a political weapon, though people will always try to use it as one. History is a mirror. And mirrors show us everything, the beautiful and the ugly, with equal clarity. The Mughals built things that made humanity proud. They also destroyed things that made humanity weep. Both are true. Both matter. Both shape the India of today. The danger is not in knowing the dark side of Mughal history. The danger is in knowing only the dark side, and using it to justify new darkness. The danger is also in knowing only the bright side, and using it to excuse or minimize genuine historical crimes. Honest history is hard. It requires you to admire and condemn the same person in the same breath. It requires you to say, this was magnificent and this was wrong. It requires you to inherit a complicated story without simplifying it into a comfortable lie. India is a complicated story. The Mughals were a chapter of that story, one of the most consequential chapters ever written. Read it fully. Think about it honestly. And then, go write the next chapter. Class dismissed. For the last time. Disclaimer: this video presents a critical and multi-perspective examination of the Mughal Empire's legacy. The information has been researched from multiple historical sources including books, academic papers, and historical records from both Indian and international scholars. This episode deliberately presents both the achievements and the failures of the Mughal period, including temple demolitions, religious taxation, and cultural suppression, based on documented historical evidence. These are not political statements but historically documented facts. Viewers are strongly encouraged to explore multiple scholarly sources and form their own informed opinions. History is complex and contested. We have tried to reflect that complexity honestly. This video is intended purely for educational purposes and does not endorse any political position or religious view. The history class respects all faiths and all communities equally.